Hey there YouTube, this is Vargas XX78 with another collection pickup video. I know I haven't posted one of these in a while, except the comic book one, but it's been a really slow winter. I haven't been able to find that many cool things. So I'm gonna actually make a two-parter because I picked up a lot of things I want to talk about in depth. But these last 2 weeks have been really good. I have been able to find a lot of really cool stuff and enough cool stuff to merit a video. So let's get started with some magazines and books I found at the swap meets. But first off, like always, I like to share with you guys my Club Nintendo. Club Nintendo, I still sustain that it's the most awesome video game magazine that we have here in Mexico. Been collecting it for a while, so I always like to show it off, and you've probably seen it in a lot of my videos. But this is this month's Club Nintendo. They give tips on Super Mario 7, which is a game I still have to buy. On the cover, they have the Tekken game that's going to come out on the 3DS. They give tips on The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, which is another game I have to get, but my economy hasn't been that well. They have reviews of Crush, Pro Evolution Soccer on 3D, Tales of the Abyss, and Resident Evil Revelations. I actually downloaded the demo for Resident Evil Revelations, and it's really awesome. I'm also gonna have to get that one because that one also looks really, really cool. But all in all, a really good magazine this month, and I really like the cover. But I was also able to find at a swap meet some old issues of Club Nintendo. Now, here in Mexico, it's really, really hard to find older issues of Club Nintendo in a good enough state. You know, these books came out. Well, Club Nintendo started in 1992, so and mostly kids would buy them. So, you know, the kids would destroy the poor magazines, and they would end up in the trash. So, to actually find a old magazine in a good enough state is really something interesting. But this guy had these magazines, and some of them are kind of beat up, but in relatively good shape. So I snatched up the ones that I didn't already own. That included this one, which is the Club Nintendo Encyclopedia. Basically, it's a big cheat book. It has all the cheat codes that were available at the time for the Game Boy, the Super Nintendo, and the fairly new at that time N64. This was a special edition that Club Nintendo came out with. So it was, even when it was new and it just came out, it was really hard to find because it was so useful. It had all these cheat codes, but I never was able to pick it up. But now I own a copy, so I thought that was awesome. Picked up this old magazine that also showcased Pilot Wing 64 again on the then new N64. It had all these articles on the games that were gonna come out, and a lot of people might ask, well, why do I even bother with old magazines? You know, when everything can be downloaded on the internet. But as a collector and a gamer, just and an old school gamer, nothing beats having, like, a physical copy. The internet might be down and you won't be able to look at anything, but you can always go into your bookshelf, take out a magazine, and get all the information, right then and there. So that's why I was really excited on finding these old Club Nintendo magazines. I also picked up this one. Now, this was a big tease when I read it as a kid. Um, they were actually showcasing this Dragon Ball game that was supposed to come out on the Super Nintendo. They had screenshots and everything, but it never came out, and that was really frustrating. But they made a big deal out of this, and yeah, it's the first and only time that Dragon Ball appeared on the cover of Club Nintendo. Also picked up this one, and in this one they talk about Street Fighter Zero, which would be known as Street Fighter Alpha. They gave tips on Spider-Man, which is on the cover, which is a really, really cool cover. Mega Man X2, and they showcased on the arcades X-Men Children of the Atom and Killer Instinct. So, really good issue. Also picked up this one, and it's the last one I picked up, showcasing Mega Man X2 on the cover. Big game that was going to come out back then on the Super Nintendo. And they also talked about the Virtual Boy, which looked interesting in the articles, but we all know what happened with that. But again, just really, really happy to pick up these old Club Nintendo. They're beat up at the corners, but all in all, they're in really good shape. So, yeah. Also at the swap meet, I picked up this Super Mario Galaxy 2 strategy guide. Uh, I mentioned this before. I like collecting the strategy guides, even though I don't personally use them. But strategy guides are awesome because they have, they have the artwork, and some of them, the better ones anyway, have like little stories on the level design and everything. So I like to pick up strategy guides when I see them cheap at the market. So also, I'm still trying to improve my book collection, and I was able to pick up some really cool books this time around. First off, I mentioned this before. I'm not a fan of soft covers. I prefer the hard covers because they're basically just more durable. But this guy that I buy my books from had these three books, and I couldn't pass them up. They are books written by Isaac Asimov. I hope I pronounced that right. Isaac Asimov is a writer of science fiction that started doing work on the 50s. And he is actually the father and the creator of the term robotics, because he would write books about robots. And he wouldn't write, like evil robots that would destroy humanity and everything. His robots were actually of a different kind on that time period. Uh, and I do know, for example, I know of iRobot because of the Will Smith movie, but when I saw a documentary on that it was based on a book, I was always curious about the book. But I've never been able to find any book by Asimov, so finding these books I thought was really cool. The first one I picked up, obviously, is iRobot. This is actually a collection of short stories featuring robots. Then the next one is Isaac Asimov, Robot Visions. Also, this is an anthology of robot stories, but in this one, they share. There's stories that happen here that are also here, so it's kind of redundant because it's from a different publisher, so that's the reason why. But uh, one of those stories is The Bicentennial Man. It's a very short story, but it was popular enough that they decided to give it its own book, which became The Positronic Man. This one chronicles in more detail the story of Andrew Martin, which is the robot that wanted to be a man. And he goes to great lengths to achieve it. If you saw the Robin Williams movie, you know that, he wanted to be a man so much, he actually went and basically destroyed his positronic brain so that he would die. Thus, people would consider him human, because as a robot, he was immortal. He would never die. So he would never be considered human. But by basically destroying himself, he was now considered a human being. So I'm halfway through this, and it's a really, really good story. I really like this. And, uh, Isaac Asimov created the three fundamental rules of the robots. And his power source was the positronic brain, which actually was used in Star Trek for Data, if you watch Star Trek: The Next Generation. So his work is very influential. Anyone that read his books was so inspired that they actually wanted to create robots, and that's why. And he was dead on a lot of his stories. One of his stories on Robot Visions is that humanity would become so dependent on machines and technology they wouldn't even be able to do simple mathematical things, and that actually has happened. A lot of people don't want to think with their heads, and they just use the freaking calculator. But so yeah, really, really influential as far as the sci-fi and the robotic thing. And he's the father of the word robotics, which I mentioned. So really cool. Also picked up hardcover edition of Dan Brown's The Lost Symbol. I mentioned this on my book collection video that I'm not a big fan of the Da Vinci Code. I thought it was good, but it wasn't, that good. But I am interested in the character of Robert Langdon. I still want to get Angels and Demons, which is his first appearance, and this is his last book featuring the character the Lost Symbol. In this one, he kind of does like a National Treasure thing where he comes back to America and he gets embroiled into this big conspiracy with the forefathers and everything. But like I said, the character is interesting enough that I want to pick up those 3 books. Also picked up Stephen King's from the Dark Tower series book 6, Song of Susanna. I heard a lot of really good things about this book series. They even made a comic book about the Dark Tower, so I'm gonna read through this one, and if I like it, I'm gonna try to pick up the rest of the Dark Tower books. Picked up this Garfield Classics books. This is Garfield Volume 8, and it has a lot of the, Garfield comic strips that came out, I think, in the 80s. And I grew up watching the Garfield cartoon, so I really like Garfield a lot. And so I'm really happy to pick this one up. And the last book that I picked up, I've always been fascinated with the samurai culture. As far back as I can remember, I've really been fascinated by this time period in Japan's history. Just something about it, I don't know, it really calls to me. And when I was younger, I knew of 2 books. One was The Way of the Samurai, which is a translation of the teachings of a samurai warrior. He would teach on the ways that a samurai has to think, how he has to act, and how he has to treat other people. That's one, and I've never been able to find that one. The other book I read about, or I knew about when I was a kid, was this one, The Book of the Samurai, the warrior class of Japan. This one basically is like an encyclopedia that tells the story of the samurais, how they started, what's their importance in ancient Japan, how they came into power and then how they lost that power. And I've always wanted to find this one, but I have never been lucky enough to actually find it. And this guy at Swap Meet had it, and I got it for 40 pesos, which is like $3. And I freaking love it. Not only does it have subject matter that is really interesting to me, but it has these big, beautiful illustrations of, ancient Japanese scrolls and look at this. It has all these beautiful pictures of Japanese ancient, drawings and scrolls, and it's very detailed. It talks about everything that has to do with samurai. Again, how they started, how they came into power, how they were their own class, that they were like the Spartans in ancient Greece, that they would only be used for war and battles and everything. But they had their own warrior code. Just, like I said, just something about the samurai class I've always found really interesting. So, that's why I love the Akira Kurosawa movies, because they're, not only are they so epic, but, the subject matter is freaking interesting to me. So, finding this book, I think, was the gem of this video. Just a really good book, and I've enjoyed every word of it. So, yeah. So, this is part 1 of the video. Like I said, I just wanted to talk about the books. But stay tuned for part 2, where I talk about some video games and the movies I picked up. And until I see you again, this is Vargas XX78. Till next time.